Thank you for watching the World Community Magazine's Hour of Power Live on Facebook with your host Edward McQueen and April Garner Davis.
Wow, good evening. Good evening. Great. Sorry for the slight delay, but it's good to have you all here. I think you're going to be quite impressed with our broadcast this evening because we have some very impressive information for you. Okay, I'm your host, Ed McQueen, and of course, co-host my sister, April Garner Davis, and she will be in the background this evening, assisting me very greatly there, and I certainly appreciate that. First of all, we want to thank everybody for being patient with us and tuning in. And we're going to make sure hopefully we'll have enough content or good content that it can be worth your time. Okay. Again, so this evening we as you probably saw in our promotion that we want to talk about the issue of, I should say Gullah Geechee instead of rice, but I'm going to say rice first, and then of course that leads into Gullah Geechee. Because when you talk about rice, that's exactly what it is. But it's not going to be in the issue of the Gullah Geechee. So tonight we have we're going to be discussing. We have with us first of all, and our author from Georgetown, South Carolina, the mighty port town down there. He's a native of Georgetown, and he's going to be sharing with us information that. Hopefully everybody who knows anything about this, the corridor, again I have to revert back to the Gullah Geechee corridor, will certainly be enlightened by this type of information. He's an author. On the name of the book is Amazing Rice, which is synonymous to Raising Grace. I suspect that's why he kind of changed the words around a little bit, but. We have with us this evening, and he's going to be discussing his books. His name is Brother Steve Williams, and he has some new revelations. It's new to me, and I'm sure a lot of it's going to be new to you all once the discussion takes place about the role that rice, not cotton, but rice, played economically into the growth of South Carolina and small parts of North Carolina. So. Without further ado, let's get with it and let's find out what has in store for with the author and how his research is. I think will probably shape some of our minds this evening with some new revelations that he brought about. So we have with us Mr. Steve Williams. Steve, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Brother Edward, and good evening to everybody. I thank you for the opportunity. And yes, we will be talking about rice, but also something that may not be common knowledge between a relationship between one of the greatest unsung heroes of this era and one of the most storied governor of this era, Governor Robert Francis Withers Austin. And so the book is entitled Amazing Rice. And we're going to be talking about rice because believe it or not, if you have any ancestry here, rice is the reason why we're here in the coastal areas of South Carolina as opposed to coming from the motherland to, let's say, Oklahoma, Texas, or any other state. Rice literally put this little unassuming city on the map. We were just a pit stop on the way to Charleston before our ancestors discovered the glories of rice. But more
Right.
importantly, we're going to be talking about a particular place called Sandy Island. Many of you may know it, many of you may not. But Sandy Island is one of the few islands that has not been gentrified. Now, if you know anything about the Gullah Geechee corridor, all the way from North Carolina to Jacksonville, most of those sea islands and other places have been gentrified. But there's a very wonderful story about Sandy Island and a gentleman by the name of Philip Allen. And I'd like to start with a quote from a philosopher named Gertie. Gertie says, "Look at a man the way he is, and he only becomes worse, but see him as if he were what he could be, and he becomes what he should be." I learned that many years ago. It's looking at a person that we give our judgment to. No one knows how any child is going to develop or what he or she is going to become, but we must see the best in them. And
Right.
I took this saying, this adage from Goethe, a German philosopher, to talk about Philip Washington, because the whole book is really a story of two legacy, one of a very poor person, unassuming enslaved worker who was completely dehumanized and marginalized, and one of the most storied governor who had all of the favor and in terms of inheritance, but it flipped at the end of well, we'll get into that. We'll get into that, brother.
Okay. Yeah. I can't wait until we really get into that. I've perused your book as much as I could. Of course, I just got it day before yesterday, I believe, or was it yesterday?
It's
You know,
new.
it was hot off of the press, but it was expected, and I couldn't wait until it came out, especially after you start. I knew that the topic was going to be on rice and the historical role that it played with the development of Georgetown, South Carolina. Everybody thought, especially in the South, or in the Carolinas anyway, everybody thought that cotton was king. But I think rice superseded everything, right?
Absolutely, rice
Yeah.
predated cotton.
Yeah.
And if you know, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but rice has to be grown. It's a delicate balance between fresh water and salt water. So it's on the edge of the borders of our nation because of the ocean. And it's because of the technology and the ingenious ways that our ancestors were able to come and build banks and build and stun the tide of salt water with fresh water and do everything about rice. As a matter of fact, one of the historians that I love, there are two historians in this book that I have met, well, three really, I've met personally. Peter Woods, who's legendary, wrote a book called Black Majority, and then
Right.
there's Charles Joyner, who's also legendary, happens to be a good friend of my dad. Both of them are gone on to glory. But there's another local historian, a fellow by the name of David Drayton, who was also an administrator here in Georgetown for many years. It was David Drayton that first said that the European or the Englishmen did not know anything about rice. But once they discovered that their enslaved workers could cultivate the land, plant the seed, and grow rice, rice became an incredible blessing to the Europeans and an inconceivable curse to Africans. And most of you, if you know anything about history, you know why we were brought over here. But I don't want to stay on that, because
Yeah, absolutely.
a lot of people think that that's really our legacy. That's not all our legacy. And I'll tell you another thing. Long before J.P. Morgan, long before John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie and all of the northern industrialists of the late 1800s, the planters in Georgetown County planted more rice that went around the world, and they became literally, particularly between 1850 and 1860, the wealthiest, the richest men in America. And of course, you know why. If you have hundreds and thousands of enslaved workers, and rice produced not just rice, which is very profitable, but there were surplus. There's mansions, there's clothing. I mean, there's other things that come from working. And so these were the first millionaires, long before the Northern millionaires. So I'll say, if people say, I don't want to know anything about rice, they should. They should, because rice is in their DNA.
Okay, yeah. So, and thanks for that narrative, Steve. I jotted down a number of points in the book as I scanned through it. Okay, um, we we put up on the screen, on not just on the screen, but on the promotion. If anybody seen what the book looks like, okay. So how long did it take you for this type of research? I know some of you had already.
Well, that's the key. I'm a historian, particularly
Yeah,
of
right.
this area. So a lot of the history I was knowledgeable about, and I've written about it for at least, I don't know, 15, 20 years. However, I wanted to put this book together because it juxtaposes the relationship with Philip Washington. We're going to define him, and for those who don't live in the area, pretty soon. But the relationship that he had, again, with one of the most coveted and storied icons of South Carolina, that is Governor R.F.W. Austin, Robert Francis Withers Austin.
Right.
And believe it or not, I juxtaposed that with a couple of things that I know from history. Let's take Richard Wright's novel, Bigger Thomas. I like that. Bigger Thomas,
You stated
from
that
that
in the book.
novel,
Yeah.
talks about how bad he feels that they being the dominant culture, they have everything. And in the book, Richard Bigger Thomas, the main character of the book, says, well, they own everything. They choke you off the face of the earth. They are like God. They don't even let you feel what you want to feel. You can only feel what they want doing to you. They kill you before you die. I never forgot that. Secondly, if you remember the play or the movie A Raisin in the Sun from the great poem from Langston Hughes,
Right.
Walter Lee Youngin struggled with his mother because his dad had passed and his mother was getting an insurance check from his deceased dad. And Walter Lee wanted to take that $10,000 and open up a liquor store.
Right.
And Walter Lee was 35 years old. And his mother said, no, you will not disgrace my husband's name with a liquor store. And so Walter Lee compared that to Langston Hughes. Whatever happens to a dream deferred? Does it shrivel up like a raisin in the sun? So the relationship between Philip Washington, who had nothing, and Governor Austin, who had everything, was very interesting because Philip Washington was like so many enslaved workers, but he also never dreamed that his entire life would be enslaved. And he had multiple opportunities to get away from slavery. Which opportunities? One was during that period, blacks who had white fathers were far more likely to be released from the stigma of slavery. But here's the thing that's interesting. Many of these, we would say mixed race now, but back then they would call them mulattoes. Those enslaved workers who had white fathers were emancipated, but not only were they given their freedom, but they were given land and property. And in some cases, they were given enslaved workers. But Philip Washington was not going to enslave anyone, even if it meant his freedom. Philip Washington, which was not common knowledge to me 15 years ago, was of mixed race. He was partly African American and partly Native American. In fact, Robert Austin, daughter, who wrote a book called A Woman's Rice Planter, really dehumanized and marginalized black in the entire book. But it was one of the most famous books that's out there. She said about Philip Washington, he is a splendid specimen for his race because he was tall, dark, and very knowledgeable, very liked by whites and black. And so Philip Washington had a chance the same year he was 15 years old when Denmark Vesey escaped. And Denmark Vesey bought his freedom. If Philip had the money, he would have bought his freedom. But like Denmark Vesey, he would have made sure that others got their freedom. He also had an opportunity when the Union soldiers came that he could leave like some of the other prominent enslaved workers and join the Union Army, but he decided to stay to help his other workers. And even after the war, when blacks were given what I call quasi-freedom, he did not leave. And we're going to get into that too, because when Lincoln died, when Lincoln was killed, Johnson was not sympathetic to the plight of blacks. And that's where that sharecroppers come in and all of the other thing. It was another form of slavery. But Philip Washington did die a wealthy man. And if you know anything about wealth, the source of all wealth is land. Whether you're talking about food or clothing or furniture, it's land. He did something for his people that I'm too proud of.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks again. Steve, I forgot to put under your title, historian. We really should have added that, and not just an author, but historian, because the narrative is so great and so informative. In your book, it said, "What's rice got to do with it?" You have photos. Some of these photos look as if they were taken back in the 1800s. Am I correct about that? Or
I would say most of them, undoubtedly. That's the period we're talking about. So yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And you go on to start talking about the wealthiest men. And there were three of them I think you listed.
Yes.
They said the richest men in America.
That is correct. Yeah.
All that. After my reading of the book, I concluded that rice made them all wealthy.
No question about it. No question about it.
Fill us in on that, if you don't mind.
All right. Well, the first thing you have to understand that when the Europeans came here, they came here with so-called grants. Now, I don't know how anybody can give you a grant to somebody else's land or property. That's like me saying, I got a grant to take your house. So that's a rare form of stupidity. But be that as it may, because we know Native Americans were here first, but they granted the Carolinas and all of the other sections. And they came here looking for some commodity to give back to their motherland, which would have been Spain or England or wherever, France. And they were not successful finding gold. They were not successful with a lot of other raw material that they thought the New World had. But
they found something more valuable than gold, didn't they?
Yes, they did. It began with indigo, but thanks be to God, you didn't need intensive labor. You didn't need thousands of enslaved workers to produce indigo. But as I said, quite by accident, according to David Drayton, that they discovered that enslaved workers had discovered how to create rice, how to cultivate rice. He was in the field one day and he saw some of his workers out there with a funny looking stick in a hollowed out tree bouncing and banging in this tree. And he got a little closer and he says, that's strange. They got a funny looking piece of stick that has a flat end. And I guess a few weeks or maybe a month later, they discovered that these enslaved workers were eating a delicious pan of rice. Quite naturally, he said, how did you grow this rice? That was impossible. Show me how you did it. And ever since then, they showed them how they flood the fields and bunk the banks and plant the seed. They prayed over it, of course, and how they were able to do it. Now, it should have been a surprise because, people think our history began when this country began. That's nonsense. They had been doing it for centuries. But because this part of the New World was considered infertile. They thought that all of that was swampland. It was swampland, but they did not know that they could cultivate it, they being our ancestors. So ever since then, it began to grow. And of course, in order to do it, they tried Native Americans, but it didn't work out. So they began to bring more and more Africans, not just from the continent of Africa, but specifically from West Africa. And as a result, they grew to be filthy rich. And Brook Green Gardens, the same Brook Green Gardens that's there now, was one of the main plantations. Sandy Island is part of right near Brook Green Gardens. Hundreds of plantations. That's why when blacks in this area start talking about, well, I'm from here and I'm from there, and they don't know. If you go back 200 years, all of this was a plantation. So you being from Browns Ferry or Hempstead is meaningless to me. And we get so territorial. It's like, oh, I'm not from Georgetown. I'm from Pawleys Island. Like that means something.
Right.
This was all plantations. And for 200 more years, they grew fat. And we're not even going to talk about the universities and the banks and the buildings and the churches and the mansions and all of the other stuff that came from the produce or the cultivation of rice. And when I say rich, some of their ancestors are still benefiting from it. Not Robert Alston, but many of the others.
You can go by some of those names that still exist today, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, I would remind some of our viewers that I talked about those three gentlemen that were recipients of or beneficiaries of this type of wealth, and we do have a photo of them, but there was a little bit of technical mishaps there, but they exist in the book, okay? And one whose name was R.E. Alston, Plowden, Weston,
Joshua John Ward.
Right, Joshua John Ward.
Who was the biggest of them all. He had 1,200 enslaved workers.
Really?
Yes.
And Steve,
yes.
Do you want to talk about the specific skill that was required and was used in order to cultivate rice and in such an enormous pace and efficiency? I
do, and let me find the page. That's 32 in the book. According to Charles Joyner and Peter Woods and Daniel Littlefield and several other prominent historians. This is not coming from Steve. Prominent historians. Charles Joyner said that rice required knowledge of planting, hoeing, winnowing, and pounding, dehusking. More importantly, it required very technical skills in clearing the land, much of it swamp or dense cypress. It required knowing what to do with the floodgates, drawing off the water when necessary and harvesting it. Enslaved laborers not only cleared the swampland, which their masters initially believed to be infertile, they irrigated these fields by an ingenious method unbeknownst to their master. They built the canals, the banks, the floodgates, controlled the flow of water, and employed a unique system of planting and dehusking of the rice. Not only that, they built the mansions. People have to understand that the technical skills that these enslaved workers had were brought over from the motherland. So the highest position that you could have, other than a slave driver, which Philip Washington was, right, is a carpenter or a blacksmith or a mason. These skills they excelled in. And so don't let anybody convince you that all we did was break our back over the land and labor over the land and sing spirituals, because that's only a fraction of it.
Let me interrupt, Steve. The labor part of the labor that you just narrated, encompassing the building of dams and the controlling the water so that certain required quantity of water gets to the rice, and they know you got to do it when. Today that's an hydraulic engineer, okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, hydraulic engineer. You got to go to school 4 and 5 years for that. You
And
know.
Brother Edward, it's really ingenious. And I say this because a lot of people just don't. Here's the thing: they think in terms of knowledge. If they don't know it, then no other ethnicity or race could ever have known it. And I've been speaking for many years, many places, colleges, you name it. And I say to those students who only think of us as being laborers in America, I said, if you know your story, if you know your history, then that by definition means you know math, you know science, you know engineering, you know philosophy, you know medicine, because we walked the earth literally hundreds, maybe thousands of years before anyone else did. And if you don't believe you know science or engineering, look at the pyramids. And you say to
Right.
yourself, how did they do that? They didn't have machinery. How is that possible? Of course, they say, well, they came from another planet and they did it. This is what we've been taught. But medicine in Hopetep, the father of medicine, not Hippocrates, we have
Right. Right.
yeah, we have a history that's very rich. But here's the problem: we don't know it, and some of us don't even care. So I say that what our ancestors were able to do was ingenious. Now, if you allow me, I want to talk a little bit about. Well, I'll go ahead. You can ask me whatever questions you like.
No. I wanted to kind of revert back to um, the laborers in the field that you have. Now, how authentic was that, and in approximately what era would you think that this photo was taken?
Well, I can almost assure you that most of these were taken during the antebellum period, which of course was before the Civil War, and many were taken afterwards. A few, because believe it or not, we continued to work the land afterwards, and that is because, well, let me just say, in the state of South Carolina, right afterwards, we're talking 1865 and part of 1866, um, the uh, the people wrote a constitution. Lincoln had been killed, and Lincoln's idea was to give, and Sherman, General Sherman, some of the land to these people. But
Right.
Andrew Johnson, didn't have those ideas. He was not empathetic or sympathetic to the plight of blacks. So what happened, the state of South Carolina wrote a new constitution, and that constitution had so many restrictions on it. It said that blacks could not leave the plantation or could not leave the state because they needed their labor. It says that they had to have a white master. It even said they had to call their plantation owner master. Um, there were so many stipulations and whatnot. In other words, they wanted to recreate enslavement. And this went on for about a year and a half. And then, thanks be to God, the 14th Amendment was passed by Congress, which enabled Philip Washington and a lot of other blacks to explore new vistas. But see, the sharecropping contract was signed by these formerly enslaved workers. Now, they couldn't even spell their name, so they put an X there. And they were unable to leave. You've probably seen a few movies. They're unable to leave the plantation because what would happen that they would have to sign their X to get material to work the land, and sharecropping means
Yeah.
just that,
Yeah.
sharing the crop.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
that's this is another form of slavery because they couldn't leave because now
Right.
most of this happened in 1877 after the Union Army left. All my
Right.
dad used to say, all hell broke loose then, and all of the gains the blacks had gained in those 12 years after the war, they methodically removed them. And then we went into a period of darkness for another 75 to 100 years. And so it had not been for the 14th Amendment, of course, the 15th Amendment, and the 13th Amendment, and the fact that the so-called North won the war, my ancestors and your ancestors could still be enslaved.
That's right. That's right. I'm trying to get this photo up of the, and I hate to keep jumping back. Yeah, that's one. But the three rich men. Here it is. It's on the screen now. I find that I applaud you for doing that type of research and finding those photos, man. And these were located where?
Most of these photos are iconic photos. That's Robert Francis on the left. You can go on the internet and find hundreds of pictures of him.
Yeah.
Same thing with Joshua John Ward, and then Plowden Weston. Not too many of him, but you have to understand, finding photos of Europeans is it's not hard.
Yeah,
um,
right, right,
because
right.
they
It's
had
not.
painting. Finding photos
Yeah.
of Philip Washington and
That's the
blacks
most
was
difficult
difficult
one.
because
Yeah.
we were not considered human
Right,
property.
right.
You find more photos of a rice field and a cow or a mule than you find a lot of these blacks
Yeah.
because they lived on no-name streets. Some of them didn't have names other than their master's name. So that's the trick, finding these people. Now, if you're famous like Harriet Tubman and some of the others, yes, but these were not famous people on Sandy Island.
Well,
And that is one
the
reason.
earliest Washington,
Huh?
yeah, the earliest Washington with the photograph that I've seen was Booker T.
Yes. Yeah, and he was after the war.
Yeah.
After
So,
the war, you can find pictures,
yeah.
many of them in the public domain. All right, but there's another story here I would like to talk about if you don't mind. Can you hear me, Brother Edward?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I can hear you. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Let's talk a little bit about Governor Austin. Governor Austin came here in the early stages of America. His ancestors, his grandfather, came here with many of the people from England and Scotland and France and all of the Europeans on the western part of Europe, and was granted land. And they did very well. They came here first to trade with the Native Americans. But as I said in the book, they found something a little bit more attractive than trade, and that is rice. Okay.
Okay,
And
let me remind our viewers that when you talk about Governor Austin, that's the one that's on the front cover with you.
yes,
Right.
yes,
Okay.
Robert Francis Hall. He's very iconic.
Yeah.
And what he owned was not one, not two, but probably at one time 12 different plantations. But he didn't start out that way. All up and down Waccamaw Neck, so-called Pawleys Island, and all those little places between here and Horry County, Myrtle Beach, there were nothing but plantations, some big, some small. The average plantation took 3 years to develop. And the average plantation on Waccamaw Neck had at least 100 enslaved workers. Austin started out on a lowly level. Compared to the other rice planters, he was not a big deal. But after his father died, his father inherited what we now know as Brook Green Gardens, and he lost it. He lost it because he just was not judicious enough to learn the nuances of running a rice plantation. He wasn't equal to the challenge.
And what was his last name? What was his name?
His name was Benjamin Austin. I believe it was Benjamin Austin Jr.
Yeah. Right.
All right, and he got depressed. One writer says he liked to spend money more than he liked earning money. Okay, but I mean, we're like that too. If you give us enough money, I don't care if you're in the NBA, we do silly stuff. We buy ropes around our necks that look like a chandelier. We buy Cadillacs. We do all kind of stuff to say, hey, look at me. I got money. Some of these guys, like, I'm not going to call his name, but there's one player who plays for Memphis Grizzly.
Yeah, he
Still
was
wants
some
to be a
embarrassment,
thug.
man.
A millionaire still wants to go into the bars with pistols and guns. You see, you can take the thug out of the community, but you can't take the community out of the thug, and it's in his DNA. But I digress.
But it's a lot behind that, bro, Steve, that he can't control. Okay, and it's a lot that other people are benefiting, but because of his stupidity. Okay, that was guided to do that. A lot of people, okay, that was guided to do that.
I just use
because you're talking about lawyers coming there and either helping him or defending him in some kind of case, and who's the benefit there? It's the lawyer. I mean, he's getting paid. Okay. So,
right, but nobody forced him to go into the club with a weapon.
I know. Okay.
All right.
Well, okay. All right.
Okay. So here's the thing. I lost my thought. We were talking about
It's all
what?
right. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. We were talking about Austin and the plantation of Brook Green Gardens and all of that.
Right.
He ended up going to West Point because he was a little bit rambunctious, and his
Right.
mother said, don't send him to college, send him to West Point, the military academy. And then while he was there and he came back, he left as a boy and came back as a man. And shortly after he came back to Georgetown, South Carolina, he lost his dad. Well, it turns out that he was very good. They had other plantations. It turns out that he was very good in cultivating rice plantations. He started with one or two, which again was inherited.
Yeah.
They gave it to him.
Right.
And then he discovered, because he was also a very good legal person, so he was a businessman, and he did very well. Before he died, he probably owned 12, and not to mention properties in Charleston. There's a big house there, and all kinds of wealth and riches. Well, I don't belittle him for that. As they say, don't hate the player, hate the game. That was the game.
Right.
Now, as a businessman, something happened in 1857. Philip Washington, who was a slave driver, but he was not just a slave driver, he was beloved by both whites and blacks. They considered him highly intelligent. He was self-taught. He knew how to treat his fellow enslaved workers. He was kind. He was smart. He probably knew more about rice than anybody else. All right. He lived on Sandy Island. Sandy Island had 5 very prosperous plantations. One of these plantations was called the Pipe Down Plantation. Philip Washington, as I said, was part Native American, Waccamaw Indians, and a Native American, I don't even like the word Indian, Waccamaw Nation, and part black. We don't know if it was his mother, his father, but he was of a mixed race. And again, they said he was a splendid specimen for his race. Now, in 1857, his so-called master, fellow by the name of Tom Pettigrew, died unexpectedly. Before then, he had left in his will that Philip would be emancipated. But after he died, the widow of Tom Pettigrew did not want any parts of running a rice plantation, which, again, it took knowledge and skill. And she decided that she would shop around. For almost 2 years, she tried to shop around, but she couldn't find any buyers. So from 1857 to 1859, she couldn't find any buyers. Now, here's what happened. The enslaved workers, well over 100 of them, they knew that if she found another buyer, they may have a cruel master. They knew that their families would be split up, and nobody in their right mind wanted that. So this is what they did. They had a secret meeting. That in alone was illegal. And had they gotten caught, they would have been hung. Okay, hanged, whatever. So they met and they talked about who they knew was a good plantation owner. They call them masters. Jesus, the only master. So here's the thing. They decided that Governor Austin, who was known as a kinder and gentler master.
Right.
Why was he known as that? Because he was bragging about how well he clothed his enslaved workers. He did give many of them an opportunity to learn a trade, blacksmithing and carpentering. And he was actually kind to some of his non-enslaved workers. He read scriptures to them. He did a lot of things. But he was one of the biggest proponents of slavery. As a matter of fact, shortly before the war, the state of Kansas was very controversial because half the people wanted to be a free state and the other half wanted to be an enslaved state. So the people who wanted to be a free state, they decided to stack the deck. They decided to send people from the east and anybody else who wanted to move to the country, the territories of Kansas, that they would pay for them. They would subsidize them. Well, Governor Austin and the other fat cats or the other rice planters said, two can play the game. Governor Austin decided that I'm going to take 100 men from each county in South Carolina. And as you know, there are more than 30 counties in South Carolina. And if they're willing to relocate or immigrate to to Kansas, not only am I going to give you land and 100 people, but I'm going to give you a Negro. That's what he said. So this is just before the war. Now, let me go back to Philip Washington. Philip Washington and his fellow workers decided on Governor Austin. But they also had to meet one more time because who would be brave enough to go make their case to Governor Austin? Number one, Philip was educated. He was self-taught. Number two, he was well liked. All of the, or most of the rice planters on Waccamaw Island, they knew of Philip Washington. He was legendary. He was like Renty Tucker. And so Philip Washington did just that. He said, I'll go there and I'll plead the case. Now, Governor Austin, this is 1859. Governor Austin did not want another plantation. And he surely didn't need another one. But because, and he had said to them, he said, no, I can't do it. I can't do it. But because of Philip Washington, he said, I will do it because he loved Philip Washington. Okay.
Right.
And little did they know that the war was coming. They had heard rumors of Yankees' impending war. But soon afterwards, the war came and they were free. Now, about 95% of enslaved workers stayed on the land because that's all they knew. And they became sharecroppers, but not Philip Washington. Philip Washington decided he wanted to explore his new vistas. He knew that he was living beneath his skill and living beneath his knowledge. Even as an enslaved, an extraordinary slave, he knew that he was being stagnated. So he left Sandy Island and went to Georgetown, which is about 15 to 20 miles from Sandy Island. And he became successful in business, as everybody knew that he would. And he began to prosper. And he bought one of the wealthiest houses in Georgetown. I was in that house today. He only stayed in that house on Front Street, 1024 Front Street, if you want to visit it. It's owned by the Kaminsky House now. But that house, he stayed in for 2.5 years. He bought it in, I believe, 1875. And by 1878, he was gone. Why did he leave? He left because the Union Army left the South. And as I said, all hell broke loose after then. And he realized he could no longer flourish in a state of retribution, racial retribution. So what did he do? He could have taken his money and he could have built houses. He could have traveled the world. He could have done all of that. But Philip Washington had character. Dr. King talked about the content of your character. Unbeknownst to almost everybody that he had forged a relationship with one of the bankers in Georgetown, a fellow named Robert Frazier. Philip Washington, when he died and they read his will or his deed, he had wealth, he had cattle, he had land, he had municipal bonds, he had silver, he had furniture, and he had money. Equivalent, at that time it was $6,000, but that would be equivalent to almost $75,000 in today's market. And so what he did was he went back to Sandy Island and he said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start a self-sufficient community because we know about growing rice. You're working for sharecroppers getting pennies on the dollar, and they're taking advantage of you as if we were still in slavery. And so he got together with his fellow Sandy Islanders, and they cultivated rice. Now, here's what happened, Brother Edward. Long after rice had stopped being cultivated, because it's hard to cultivate rice when you don't have thousands of enslaved workers, also several hurricanes, Sandy Islanders were doing quite well with growing rice. They never rivaled their masters' millions, but they had enough to support themselves. And all into the 1930s, they were still doing, maybe even 40s, still doing well with rice. This is what happened when you're not gentrified. And the developers come and say, we're just going to bulldoze over you. They said, no, we're going to leave this because wealth is the source of all, land is the source of all wealth.
Absolutely.
And somebody said, before the Europeans came into Africa, we had the land and they had the Bible. When they finished, we had the Bible, they had the land. Don't let anybody fool you. Trying to take your land, you don't know what's in that land, but that's God's goodies in the land, be it diamonds or whatever. And so that's why they, in my opinion, I'm kind of controversial, so you don't always want me on a podcast. I think that's why they're trying to take Greenland right now. It had nothing to do with military. There's something in that land that they want. But I digress.
Well, that's been exposed. There are some minerals, according to the president.
Yes.
There are minerals there that America needs. Okay, wholeheartedly. And it's just like gold. It's better than gold. Okay, I think lithium was one which contributes to the extension of a battery or better battery for a car. Okay, electric car. But anyway, this beside I can get into that and give you some real revelations. But you mentioned the Alston, Allston.
Yes.
That name seems to have caught a grip onto the Georgetown and Charleston area because there's a street named after Reverend Luther Alston. You may have seen that it intersects with 17 somewhere as you're going there, Santee, I believe, or is that Paul's Island? It's down
Paul's Island. I've passed it 100 times.
Yeah. Same here. I'm assuming that even though it's with one L, Alston, I think it certainly is. It emanates from.
It's all the same family. They vacillate back and forth.
Right.
Most of the blacks in this area are named after their oppressors, enslavers.
Right.
My name is not Williams, but that's the name that was given to me. So there's some the Pettigrew, Austin. There's a lot of names here that we have, and I'm just telling people the history of that.
Yeah. That's all that is. It's just history. Nobody's going to be belligerent or anything. It's just it's new revelation that it's revelation to a lot of people, especially young people who don't even know. Okay. About that. But
Brother Abbott, let me just say this. There's an old saying, God does not like ugly, and I subscribe to that. Here's a man, talking about Austin, with one of the wealthiest men in America, and here's a man who is one of the poorest men in America, and I juxtapose that between being a nobody and being a somebody. But God does not like ugly. Here's what happened after the war, the Civil War, because the South, a lot of my friends may not like to hear me say this, but I don't scratch where it doesn't itch. I say it the way I know it. After the war, the Southerners had gambled that they would win and lost their shirts. They lost everything. Their riches came crumbling down. And so one of the wealthiest men in the world, in the country, maybe the world, lost everything because he had so many properties. But after the war, he couldn't pay the taxes and pay for the debt on these properties. And so he died in, I think, 1860 or 61, and he was poor. And he wrote, and all of this is in the book. None of this is coming from me. So don't say this black man said it. It's all in documented books. One of the things that planters used to do was to leave their children in a plantation. They would say, well, you're getting married, so I'm going to put you on your feet with a plantation. As I told you, the model children planters did the same thing. He lamented that even before he died, he could not leave an inheritance of a plantation. But Philip Washington, who was born poor, died wealthy. So it flip-flopped. It's like indigo and rice. Indigo was the major cash crop or cash cow, and then it flip-flopped with rice. God does not care anything about your color, whether you're free or bonded, whether you're black or white, whether you're rich or poor. He's going to level it. He says he sits high and looks low, and he understands our plight. Philip Washington is an unsung hero. We can talk about rice all we want, but I don't know any other enslaved workers who died wealthy from enslaving 3/4 of his life. In the last quarter of his life, he helped his community. And to this day, the land down Sandy Island has not been gentrified, and there are still people living there.
I noticed, Steve, in your book. I didn't see one of Philip Washington. You couldn't find a photo, right? I mean,
I would pay half a year's salary if somebody can bring me a photo of Philip Washington. Like I said, we were not considered human.
Yeah.
So why would they take a picture of him?
Yeah, and that's true. But I also noticed that the discernment here was rather complex in terms of the photo West Point. Now that was authentic. It was taken in 1817, according to this book.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
and that's a, now are those black soldiers? Are those black West Pointers?
You know, Brother Edwards, I can't even tell you. I don't know.
Because it certainly looked like that. Okay.
Yeah, especially the two up front.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. But see, when you're doing a book, a historical book, you want to make sure you get the period accurate. In other
Right.
words, you can't do a book on 1878 and you see a automobile car there. So I just wanted to make sure the period is accurate. But you have to understand the way we take pictures with our cell phones now, it's not the way it was back then. Almost you have to have money to get a portrait or a picture made of you, or you had to be somebody.
Yeah, you got to be somebody. Yeah. Well, that's how it exists today. I mean, you want to get to certain places of your desire, then you really got to you got to know somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're still missing. I mean, I know they're trying to take it away, but we're still. When I first came back to Georgetown, I wasn't raised here. I heard you say I'm a native. My parents are native, but I was not raised here.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
as I was combing through the books at the library and all of the other places, I realized that they were always talking about the glory of the antebellum South, the mansions and the plantation. Literally hundreds, maybe thousands of books are about it. But I'm like, what about the people that built these plantations? What about the people that built these mansions? What about them? And so I started telling our story.
Yeah. Well, that's why that's why we have you on the program. We want to know. I'm anxious to see this new book of yours, man, and believe me, from what I've read, it's very quite revealing, and it's new revelations for me, especially because I wasn't aware of some of these things, and just knowing about how the role that Rice played in the development of Georgetown, especially, and up and down in South Carolina on the coast. That's very interesting, and a lot of people should be reading it. Everybody, okay, because cotton was not really the king like rice was. We had, and especially, I wanted to point out that the rice owners didn't know how to till the land, but the people who came with the skills, and that's one right there on the screen. That's part of that's in your book.
Yes.
Okay. Of I don't know how old that photo is. I don't know if that's a painting or a photo, but it looks
It's
like
a photo, and
authentic photo
it's definitely antebellum, and I believe they were in Charleston.
in Charleston.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it depicts rice workers. Is that correct?
absolutely.
Yeah, right.
They're carrying it on their heads.
Carrying
Yeah.
on their heads.
Yeah.
And could you fill us in on when they carry it on their heads? What's next in order to cultivate rice? I know you're not an expert on it, okay, like they were, but can you fill us in for the younger people who want to know how rice was really in general cultivated? Again, now, I'm not expecting you to go into specifics because you know.
I'll give you a general synopsis of the cultivation of rice. Rice, like a lot of things, has to be planted. It has to be watered. It has to be nurtured. And again, the delicate balance between salt water and fresh water. Now, we're not even talking about the mosquitoes, the alligators, the rats,
That's right.
and all of the other dangers. Woo, Lord, let me tell you, God was with us, because
Absolutely.
during the so-called sickly season, that's when the yellow fever and the malaria was coming, and these planters, again, some of the wealthiest people in the world, could not stay on their own land, on their own plantation. But they had enough money to go to the coast, or to go to Florida, or to go to Europe, or go to New York. And the sickly season lasted from basically, I would say, July, August to October. Now, once rice is planted and it's ready to be cultivated, there were several steps in between. That's where the winnowing and the fanding and the pounding and the dehusking came in. Now later on and then once all of that was done, and it looks like the same rice that we have today. Actually, it doesn't. The rice is technically brown. And so,
That's right.
so is bread, so is sugar, so is a lot of other stuff. But I'm not going to get into why it is enriched, why they made it white, because God didn't make it white. You understand?
That's gonna be another topic,
That's the
but
whole
I
nother
do want to
story.
get on that topic at another
Right.
time
So,
because
so,
yeah, it's
so
information
it
that
went
we
to
need
a
to know.
mill
Okay.
where they stored it in the mill. Now the Europeans were ingenious of marketing it and selling it. Once they knew the value of it, they said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna make some money here," and that's exactly what they did. All right. And so the little bit that I know about it is that later on came machinery to help separate very aspects of rice and make it more profitable. But that's like any other invention. The first cars were not very efficient, but then they made it better to what we have today. But again, an idea has to start somewhere, and the idea was in the motherland for all thousands of years. So it wasn't new to them. They knew all about rice, but they didn't do it on a commercial basis. They did it to grow food and live off of the land. The commercial profits from rice definitely came from the Europeans.
Right, 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 right.
And
That's
trust me, brother Edwards, if if they could, I believe many of them to this day will reinvent you know what to make money. But see, that's why I like Philip Washington. Dr. King says, "Don't judge me by my color, but judge me by the content of my character." You cannot enslave people. I don't care what color the person is. You cannot do that and profit from it and then say, I've done a good thing. Many of these
yeah.
planters were very religious. They went to church every Sunday and they had no problem enslaving people. Again,
Oh,
that's not what the book is about. The book is about what Philip Washington did for his people. He was the Mahatma Gandhi. He was the Moses. He was
there.
the Nelson Mandela of Sandy Island. And I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to exploit Philip Washington because I don't get a lot of money for this. But I want to champion him. And this
Well,
book,
yeah, yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead,
and
brother.
I certainly appreciate that.
Uh-huh.
Again, now these are new revelations to me, and I'm so glad that you're hosting us with this narrative of these different people. Now, the book is very interesting, very interesting, and we're fortunate, the WCM Live family and the World Community Magazine. We're fortunate to have access to this book. You just came off the print, right? Last
Yes.
Wednesday or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I noticed that there's this young lady, Austin's daughter, Elizabeth Austin.
Pringle.
Uh,
Yeah.
right now, she is not that it makes a whole lot of difference, but is she was she a slave? Was she a slave on the? She looks like she was mixed.
No, she wasn't mixed, as far as I know, but who knows? They say
Okay,
mama's
okay.
baby, papa's maybe. So who knows? But here's what I do know. She was a favorite daughter of Austin.
Right.
And after enslavement, she lamented, along with several other family members, that I can't get my enslaved workers to be productive or industrious. For some, this is to the Union Army that was here
Yeah.
until
Right. Right. Right.
1877. He said, they
Right.
won't work. And I said to myself, I wonder why. I wonder why. And they won't do the right thing. I said to myself, I wonder why. And they're breaking in some of the houses and they're stealing. I said, I wonder why. You had them under your foot for 200 years, and now you're worrying about what they're doing? Don't get me started, Brother Edward. And so she wrote a very famous book under a pen name, Pennington, I believe. And it got in the New York newspapers back in the early 1916. And she actually became fairly affluent or wealthy for writing. And the book is called A Woman's Rice Planner. A lot of people in Georgetown champion her. That's fine. I can't do it because when I read the book, like I said, she completely marginalized and dehumanized her workers. They
Well.
talked in Gullah, and so she makes fun of their language and all of that. But she liked Philip Washington. He was a splendid specimen for his
Right.
race. He was tall and dark, sort of like you, Brother Edward. And And she was just crazy about Philip Washington. But he was well spoken. He was articulate. Well, most of us could be well spoken, articulate, if you would allow us to have an education. You understand? So it's funny how you're blaming the victim, but you can
Yeah.
look up the book. It's called A Woman's Rights Planner, and she has another book that came out later. It's called The Chronicles of Chicoria Woods. Again, praising the plantation life, talking about the glory of the antebellum South. And I'm not trying to belittle because it was glorious for them, but it was not glorious for everybody.
Yeah, and that's been documented 1,000 times. That type of description. Okay, um, again, I'm appreciative of the type of information that you're bringing about, and especially in the research that you've done. Okay, I think so. If I didn't ask you this before, how long did it take you from inception of knowing what you wanted to do with the type of book that you want? Uh, how long did it take you to research the information and compile it ready for print?
Well, here again,
I want to set the task in front of our viewers, let the people know that what you had to go through, okay, and complexities. I assume that there were complexities that.
there were, but here's the thing, Brother Edward. I had an advantage. I had an advantage from the time I was a kid. My father was always championing our story. I was a little boy watching TV. He would point to somebody on the TV. I'm 6, 7, 8 years old. Steve, that's Jackie Robinson. Steve, that's Constance Motley. Steve, that's this, that's it. So I grew up with a thirst for our history. Now, and I'm not the only one in my family, but I did. Now, I started to become interested in our story in high school and learned a great deal. As far as this book is concerned, much of the material from the book are in some of my other books. One of my best-selling book is called Ebony Effects: 150 Unknown Facts About Blacks in Georgetown. And so I've already written several things about Philip Washington and Prince Washington, but I did not know until a few years ago where the house was in Georgetown. I asked everybody, and they say they didn't know. We knew it was on Front Street, and that's the wealthiest section of Georgetown. But I discovered maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, where exactly the house is. And unbeknownst to me, I didn't know because I'm on the board of the Kaminsky House that they now own the house. So I couldn't wait to get inside the house. And I was in there the other day. I was in there today. Like I said, our first book signing will be the last Friday of this month. But in terms of putting the book together, I had to do more research on Robert Francis Withers Austin because I didn't know a great deal about him. So I had to go through several books and several things to find out about him. And I don't tear anybody down to build anybody up. He was a great man. He did great things, and he was so-called kinder, gentler. But when you're
Right.
enslaving people, there's nothing kind or gentler about that. You understand?
You know,
Well, he's known as a kinder, gentler enslaver. As a matter of fact, my mind went back to high school when my teacher in the 11th or 10th grade said to our class, she said, class, close your books. I know what the book says about enslavery. I know what it says, but I need to tell you. She had a soft voice. She said, class, I don't care what the book said. The relationship between a slave, we don't even use the word slave anymore, Brother Edward. Nobody
right.
is born a slave. God doesn't make slaves. You can be enslaved, but you're not born a slave. But she said the relationship between the slaves and their master was just like family. I almost peed on myself when I heard that. I'm one of two black students in the class. And I said, I can't believe she said that. But my father and my mother had already given me my history, and I knew better. See, our problem is we don't know any better. They say if you knew better, you do better. The Jewish community doesn't wait to tell their children about the Holocaust. We start teaching our children right now. You and I were talking the other day. They're trying to erase Harriet Tubman. I've written not one, but 3 books on Harriet Tubman. We have to tell our story. And if we
Well,
don't tell our story, we're not getting the truth.
I'll
And
give you
so,
yeah.
yeah,
Allow me to give you the update on Harriet Tubman's erasure. That's been reinstated as per yesterday evening, I believe.
I saw that on the
reform.
news.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's only because people made such a fuss about it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, Frederick Douglass says power concedes nothing without a struggle. We got to fight for everything we can. And that's part of the problem. A lot of us think we've gotten over. You know, in the church we say, how I got over. We think we made it. Why? Because we can buy televisions, we can buy cars, we can go to school, we can do all those things that we couldn't do 50, 60, 70 years ago. But we're getting an awakening now, aren't we? So we have to know where we came from, and that's all I'm trying to do. And believe it or not, a lot of the resistance that I receive is from my own community. They say things like, well, you weren't born and raised here. What makes you an expert? Anybody can do the research. In fact, it's easier now than it was. My first book was written back in, you still there, Brother Edward? I think we lost you. My first book was written back in 1986. And at that time, I had to stay in the library. I was living in the state of New York, so I was just about in the library as much as I had free time. Okay, I think we got disconnected. And so what happens, again, putting the research together, writing the book, you got a lot of help. The challenge with a book is marketing it. It's like rice. If you're just growing rice to feed your family, that's one level. But if you want to make money, you have to market your product. And the same thing with books. When I write books, and I don't write it to be rich, I wish I were, but I write it to tell our story, because our story is the greatest story that's never been told. And I want the people of Georgetown to be happy about these heroes. I can't write about Baltimore or Atlanta or all of these other icons that the children read about, but I can tell the story of Georgetown, because Georgetown was unique, and it was unique because of rice.
And you know something, Steve, um, I'm finding out um, between you and other historians there, and the Gullah Geechee representative, Ms. Hemingway, and a lot of other people who I'm sure you look at as contributors yourself.
Yes.
Georgetown, probably more than any other county in South Carolina, has the most intriguing history, tracing back to the port of slavery, because it was one of the ports, Georgetown and Charleston, port of entry. And it seems like the potential that Georgetown has for being developed in order to benefit from the tourist aspect of Georgetown, just by wanting to know all this history, it seems to me is enormous, man. But
it really is, and I have to say this. I want to give credit to a friend of mine named Lee Brockington, who was the first to uncover the story of Pipe Down Plantation and Philip Washington. She's an incredible historian. She happens to be the white, but she is a good friend of mine. And she's probably forgotten more than I have ever learned, but she was the one that first brought the story of the Pipe Down Plantation and Mackenzie Beach to me. Other people may have known it. But let me tell you something about Georgetown. This is an unassuming little town. As I said, it was a pit stop on the way to Charleston. But Georgetown has had more notable blacks that come out of this little town than a lot of other towns in South Carolina that have risen to a national level. I didn't know 10 years ago the relationship between Harriet Tubman and James Bowley. I did not know 15 years ago, the relationship between Albert Sinclair, William Albert Sinclair, who was one of the founding members of the NAACP. I did not know the relations between Joseph Haynes Rainey and one of the prominent senators, Senator Charles Sumner, who was literally beaten down in the halls of the Senate. And Rainey was at his funeral as one of the pallbearers. I didn't know a great deal about James Bowley, who helped open the doors to blacks and the University of South Carolina, albeit for only 3 years before the Union Army left. Georgetown has had major people come through here and reach national levels. That's why I've written so much in my books about it, because now every town has some history and every town has some hero, but Georgetown has more than their share. And the reason is, if you want to be judgmentally honest, there were more of us on this coastal area of South Carolina, North Carolina, and Florida, whatever. A lot of people don't understand that the western states didn't always exist. We were talking about Kansas earlier and California. That was not our territory. Blacks basically congregated or was condensed in this area. So a lot of famous people have gone to heights. I mentioned William Albert Sinclair. The man had 4 degrees. He was born in 1858. They lynched his father, and he decided that he was going to grow up to be somebody and to do something about it. A famous writer, an Irish writer, said, all that is necessary for evil to exist is for good men to do nothing. He grew up and he got not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 degrees. One of us a medical degree from Mahari College, Medical College. Another one was a theological degree, and then one was from Howard University, and the other one was from, I believe, Clapton. Greatness have come out of Georgetown. The scripture says, if anything good come out of Nazareth, there's a heck of a lot of good that's come out of Georgetown. We just don't.
Let me tell you. Look, we'll see. This is just part 1. Okay.
Okay.
We're gonna have you back.
I'm like my dad. I can go on and on. I'm a preacher now.
It's okay. It's okay. We're gonna have you back. Time has not been in our best favor. Especially we have another topic to come on here just very briefly. But you can hang around in the studio to hear this. But we're certainly glad that you came on, and I just want to say personally that appreciate you coming on and sharing that book with a bunch of new revelations like that. And I feel honored to be one of the first to grab a hold of that book hot off the press.
Well, you're my brother. You're my brother.
Yeah, and
while we're talking, the book is $20. It's hardback. It's chock full of pictures.
Yeah. Right. Yep.
And you're more than welcome to contact me or everybody in Georgetown knows me.
Yeah.
So, but if not, I can give you my phone number. But whatever you need.
Yeah. You put it on the screen. Your phone number on the screen. Let's see. See if we can get it up there.
I have an 864 area code, 346-0749. And I live locally, but you can also get the book online, starting with Amazon and some of the other booksellers.
Let me have that number again.
864 area code, 346-0749.
Okay.
And my email address is 424steve@gmail.com. Again, 424steve@gmail.com.
Good. Great. Fantastic. All right, man. So look, again, I certainly, there we have it on the screen here. The number is 864-346-0749. The email is 424steve, STEVE, @gmail.com. And the book was what, $20 you said, right?
It is.
$20, yeah. And I think it consists of it's not very thick, but sometimes that's the best thing to do when it's not a very thick book. It doesn't kind of give you any preconceived notion of you feeling obligated to have to read all that, okay,
exactly,
in order to get what you want out of a book. So
it's an easy read, yes.
Yeah, it's an easy read, man. This is merely 85 pages, something like that, I believe, what I saw. Yeah.
Pages. And Brother Edward, please feel free. I know you can do it, but I talk a long time, so edit whatever you need out of it. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Not a problem.
But look, I got to upload you on the graphics, okay, in the book, okay? It's not a whole lot of reading with no supporting graphics. It is that. It's a lot of reading, but you have supporting graphics, and these graphics make you want to be inquisitive, okay, about what we're looking at here. It makes you want to ask questions, okay, and that in turn leads to having another conversation with you. We'll leave it off that note, okay?
All right. Thank
All
you so
right.
much.
Thank you for being on.
All right. Thank
You know Mrs. McIver.
I do. A good friend of
Yeah,
mine. Yes.
we're trying. Yeah. Well, she sent us some information, and we have. Hey, guess what? She's on.
I see you. Hi, Miss McIver.
Well, hello.
Hey there.
I see Winston D. McIver Sr. under that. I'm not sure why.
I don't know who that is.
Well, Mrs. McIver.
Either way, I'll just accept the McIver name. Okay.
Yeah. We'll just erase the other part. Just stop
Okay.
with McIver and take off the senior part because you're definitely not senior. You're junior.
And I'm
if
not
anything.
Winston either. Well, it's really almost a travesty for me to follow this presentation. My head is spinning. However, I do have a notebook here. You see how thick this is?
I do indeed.
Most of the pages are covered with the information that I received tonight. And I just want to greet you two tall, handsome brothers. Was a part of your presentation, Steve?
I heard tall, handsome brothers, and I love you already.
Exactly. So I
fine.
greet the both of you as well as the listening audience. I just want to share a couple of things with you.
First time I've ever heard that in my life.
Aside from purchasing your books, we did quite a bit of it last year.
And I want to thank you for that. You have been a tremendous supporter of mine. And I can't begin to thank you. Thank you.
We will continue to do that this summer with our young people. But tonight, I just wanted to share with you a little bit of information about a very urgent, a very important meeting that we have put together for Sunday, April 13th at 4 o'clock at the Friendship Missionary Baptist Church. We are trying to pull together our parents, grandparents, our communities, all that have a vested interest in young people to come out that evening to get some important information that will help us to advance our children. We all have a vested interest in children, especially our own, and we all want what's best for our children. And there are some things that came out as a result of Project 2025 that really impacts all of us in education, especially our young people.
Yes.
And because all of this is interconnected, all of this is connected with every other aspect that we found in that proposal, Project 2025. So the impact that it has on education is what we are going to focus on. And we are asking that every living being, even young people, to come out that evening to hear this information that we have to share with you. We're going to talk specifically about the Department of Education and the dismantling of that department and the impact that that's going to have on all of us, especially our young people. We're talking about elimination of services to students with special needs.
Yes.
We're talking about book banning. We are talking about major cuts to staff, which is inevitable when we talk about downsizing or dismantling the Department of Education, and also the watering down of the African American history. What we're trying to do is to put together some strategies that will help our parents to be able to deal with, handle situations that occur in our schools and the kinds of things that they could do to help, offset some of what's happening that we are sure that's coming down the pipe. The other information that we're going to share with parents, we have a resource listing that we will hand out to the parents of resource people that are in the school district, the Horry County School District. We have contact numbers, email addresses that parents can use to get information or to ask questions. However, we are encouraging parents to start at the school level. So we will pass out that information that evening. And we are asking everyone to please come out and support this effort. That Sunday, April 13th at 4 o'clock at Friendship Missionary Baptist Church. There are several of us who are working to pull this together, and that's Miss Juliana Brown, Dolores Rosia, and myself. And we've gotten together to make sure that the information that we present to the community will be vital to at least get them started in strategizing of, efforts to help our young people as they go through this, terrible time.
Miss McGarver,
Yes.
I don't know if you remember, but that is how you and I first met. Your church, I'm just going to give a shout out, in my opinion, is one of the most Afrocentric churches in the state. And when I was there many years ago, Reverend P treated me like a king and your church members. I'm indelibly grateful to what you guys are doing, because we are sleeping like Rip Van Winkle through a revolution, and they're really doing it right under our nose.
Exactly.
And if we don't do what we have to do, believe me, life is going to change dramatically. And you've been on the vanguard. You are a drum major, and everybody in Conway knows you and your family. So I want to thank you for all of the help you've done. And if anything I can do, I shall.
Well,
Steve, you behind the 8 ball, good buddy. She's the icon of Conway.
Our effort started at the Bethel AME Church, where we had 2 community meetings on Project 2025, and that was in its infancy. Now we know what has come to fruition, and also what we anticipate coming out of everything that has happened so far. So this will be pretty much our 3rd community meeting, but the first where we see that the parents really need to be an active participant and to come on board. So, and we will be rotating these meetings from church to church. But this particular meeting will be held at the Friendship Missionary Baptist Church. So just spread the word for all of you listeners out there. And we will be as concise as we can. We won't hold you long. And we will serve refreshments as well. You will have boxed meals to take with you.
Good. And that's Sunday afternoon.
Yes, at 4 o'clock at Friendship.
Right. That's just Sunday coming. That's just Sunday coming, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And the other announcement that I had has to do with our Gullah tea. And, I can't get away from this Gullah dialect. So anything that I do that occurs along the Gullah Geechee corridor, anything that happens along the corridor, I try to participate. So we have a Gullah tea, sipping paint. Now this is tea. We're sipping tea, and we will be painting. We have African art that will be on canvases that folks could use to paint and take them home, as souvenirs. And that tea will be presented by Jackie Williams. And I know, Steve, you know her.
I know Jackie well.
Excellent. So if there's anyone out there that would like to participate in that, that's going to be held on Saturday, April 19th, 12 to 2 at the Owens Family Center on Sandridge. So if you can't remember all of that information, just please give me a call. The tea is $30 per person, but with every tea, we have a savory food pairing. So we will be feeding you as well. So we're asking you to help support that because the proceeds from that will help support the summer literacy initiative that we have in place where we use Steve's books as well last year. And again, we will get that book and I will be writing a curriculum on that. And the young people will be able to use that. So those are important announcements that I'd like to make.
The young
The
people are going to be enjoying this book. They're going to be enjoying Amazing
Of
Rice.
course, we
Okay.
have another one that we will be looking at as well, but we will share that with you before, on the next
Yeah.
broadcast.
Yeah.
And the other is that the Whittemore Alumni Scholarship, of course, is out. The MacWin Scholarship is out. With the MacWin, the deadline is April 15. And my son and I give 5 $1,000 scholarships to folks in the Williamsburg, Georgetown, and Horry County areas. And we've had several winners last year from the Georgetown, Williamsburg area. And instead of giving 5, we wound up with so many applicants that for the past 3 years since we've been doing this, we've given 7 scholarships. And this past year we gave 8. So, and that's not money that we've, asked for donations for. That's something that we give back to the community.
What's the deadline again?
It's
What's the
April
deadline?
15th. April 15th.
April 15th.
And the last thing I think I would like to announce is I've been working with Tanya Pickett, who's over the guidance services in the Horry County schools. And we have something that we are calling the Next Level Learning Grant. All of the young people that started in the summer literacy program will be.
Ms. McIver.
Yes.
Please forgive me for interjecting each time, interrupt you. But how do they apply?
It's online.
Where do they go? Online.
I will get that information for you because Tanya Pickett is handling it through the district office area. So we have a link that we can give to the audience.
Okay, so we're going to further discuss it a bit more next week because I want to begin the initiation of the summer jobs program next week on the
great.
broadcast. On the broadcast.
Because
so,
we are partners with that as well. That's great. This Next Level Learning Grant, we're going to meet with the parents of the young people who started the Camp Rainbow some 15 years ago. When we had the camp at my house, we had up to like 31 kids a day, taught every part of a curriculum that you could think of. Well, those young people who started with that camp and those that are in the summer literacy program now, they will be a part of this Next Level Learning Grant. I've set aside like $50,000 where we are going to start with those that are graduating seniors this year. They'll be eligible for the MacWin Scholarship. And then their sophomore, junior, and senior year, if they maintain the grades, that money will be sent to their colleges for them to have an additional $1,000 scholarship each year for the 4 years of college. So we are going to meet with those parents to share that. So the summer literacy program, I'm telling you, is just important. Not only do we work with the books, our African-American books, our books by African-American authors, we also take these young people on these field trips. We've been with Steve in Georgetown for Harriet Tubman. When we used the book, we went there. We took a busload of young people there. We go to Charleston. We just try to travel along the corridor. So I don't want to take any more time because I know this is late. But if you need any information about that meeting that's going to take place on Sunday, you can contact Juliana Brown, Dolores Rozier, and we have some numbers that we can give out if you want to do that now, Edward. I'm not sure. But just contact me and then I'll get the information to you.
Yeah, right. Mr. Dolores Rozier's number is 843. It'll be up on running across in a few minutes. 843-254-5367.
Exactly.
Okay, 843-254-5367.
Okay. Well, I certainly appreciate this time, but it was so interesting to hear you, Steve, and the information that you presented. There's so much new information there that I didn't know.
I really didn't. I just didn't. And I think your research that you've done is need to be applauded. To the utmost, man. If you can do any more research, you might have to get a part 2.
Well, I might, as long as God give me strength. And let me just say, to God be the glory.
Yeah. And don't forget to come out next Sunday, because there's going to be a great awakening.
We need it too.
Yeah, and Steve, it will be worth your while. Trust me.
Yes.
Really, it'll be worth your while. If you can make it, please do. If not, we certainly understand. Yeah, we certainly understand. So. Well, this has been an evening, okay? This has been an evening, almost 9 o'clock. So, So we appreciate the both of you and getting this information out to our community, and that's what this broadcast is about. That's what our magazine is about, and that is making sure that nothing is left out for our community in order for us to be prosperous and thrive. It used to be that when we took one positive step, somebody took us 2 steps back, but that's okay. We'll catch up. All right. So I want to say good evening to everybody, and there's a certain person I haven't called her name yet, but she's behind the scenes and she's doing all the engineering work. She should have. No, I don't know what her degree is in, but it should have been in engineering. Okay. That's my co-host, Ms. April Garner Davis. From now on, she's coming back to be visible on, But just to let you know, she should have gone to engineering. Well, she didn't have to go to engineering school. I mean, she's
the AI.
Yeah.
She's the AI.
That's right.
In flesh.
Okay, so Godspeed and hope, and we will be talking again. Okay. And thanks for you, Ms. McIver, and thanks for the information regarding the event coming up on April 13th. Again, that's at 4 p.m. Okay?
4 p.m.
Right. This is at the Friendship Missionary Baptist Church. The address there is 1111 Granger Road in Conway. So if, Brother Steve, you can put it, you're going to be communicating anyway, but you can put it in your GPS. It'll get you straight there, okay? You can't miss it.
I've been there before. Like I said, I
right.
never will forget how they treated me.
Right, and they're going to be talking a bit more about this Project 2025, how critical that is, but it's not talked about enough about the warnings that need to come out for the community. Okay, so God, thanks so much for everybody, and Godspeed. We'll be talking next week. Again, next week we'll be talking a little bit more about what Mr. McIver was talking about, the Project 2025, along with the upcoming Summer Jobs Program. We're implementing it this year. We skipped last year due to some personnel changes, adequate personnel, but we're not going to let that stop us this time. Okay? We'll be collaborating with the Ms. McIver's group, and that should be a dandy. All right? So we'll see you next week.
Good night. Good night.
Night.
Thank you for watching the World Community Magazine's Hour of Power Live on Facebook.